So guys, today's topic is ideas can change the world. This is something quite provocative to a guy like me because theoretically we are an ideas business and we use our imagination, our creativity all the time. But I want to caution you in thinking that having a great idea is good enough. I think ideas, there are good ideas and there are bad ideas. And I'll take you through a process of how we evaluate ideas that are actually viable, because when we think about a new idea, we think about a business and organization and we try and find out, does that idea have legs? Can it live? Can it stand on its own feet? And there's a specific toolkit that we use to assess ideas that's quite simple that I want to share with you in how we apply it. Normally, we work in the world of business. So what you are doing, imagining a new Africa in 20 weeks, that's also how businesses think of innovation in general, because people are getting more lean and quicker about innovating. So where in as past you had elaborate systems and processes, etc., large organizations that we work with traditionally have begun to see the value of thinking like startups, and many of them are adopting leaner models. So what you guys are doing is putting some pressure on yourselves. That's actually a very good thing, because you have to launch things and test things. You can't, a desk is a very dangerous place from which to innovate and from which to conceive of new things, because business plans are very theoretical. You've got to go out there and prototype and test things. So this is kind of what we normally do. We work with commercial organizations and we design their future and try to imagine what the future of their business looks like. Our traditional clients are organizations that have come to an end of their current business model. You'll think about banks, media organizations, telcos. They're all dying, right? And they all need to reinvent themselves, and there are ways that this can be done quite productively. Our main magic is creativity. And I think there's a specific notion about creativity I want to leave with you, because the so-called creative industries very often have a superficial notion of creativity. I'm just going to present you with a quote that a friend of mine called EJ, he's a Nigerian and he runs a really, really great innovation business in the UK, and he talks about the new creatives. This was on a conference in Dubai last week. The operative part here about creativity is the middle piece that I've tried to highlight. They're wrestling the word back from half a century of superficial, ghettoized use and returning it to its roots, the development of new realities. I think the problem with many creative people that we see, or with people that call themselves creative, is that they have a very much the shoot from the hip view of creativity. That's not our view. Our view is that creativity is too powerful. It needs to be deeply rooted in a problem, or solving a problem and understanding a problem with all its elements. And we would call those wicked problems in design thinking. Problems that are unclearly defined, that are very tricky to unpack and understand. That's why creativity and imagination to us is a very rigorous process of testing ideas, of research, of building and launching things, okay? So that's the notion we have. If we talk about imagining a new Africa, a lot of our work currently happens outside of South Africa. We've got a project in Kenya at the moment on farmers, and that's something Emma might want to think about on Wednesday, because obviously agriculture, for instance, is one of the really, really big, heavy lifting jobs that are part of imagining a new Africa. Our big advantage, as you'll all know from the socio-demographics, that we're a very young continent, and we have people that have less baggage and that are less hindered by their kind of past experiences. One of the big flaws we see with companies operating in Africa, though, is that most of them are running legacy European-influenced business models in an African context. And that's why banks are failing, that's why media companies are failing, because they don't really understand the needs of the African consumer and African consumers as they emerge. So it's up to us to create new companies, new organizations, new businesses that are better at addressing the needs that we have on this continent. And what that requires is a very deep understanding of people's needs, and Francois will share a solution from the healthcare space that also applies this kind of design thinking logic. So you might have heard about design thinking, but I kind of added the doing piece to it. Design thinking as such is a mindset to solve problems, but it really, what makes it special or different from other tools is that it has very tangible parts embedded in the process, because it prototypes ideas, it tests ideas, and it builds business cases on the back of that. And I think that's just what I want to urge you to do, is to test, to experiment, to create tangible things that you can put in front of people to see if they like this. So this is a typical process, and I'm not sure where you are in your 20-week cycle. But what I said initially is that the first thing is research. So you have to really, whatever you want to build, whatever you are imagining, understand the subject matter at a deeper level and spend time with the people that you're developing the solution for, and really take your own, they say, call it a beginner's mind. Pretend you know nothing about it and leave behind all the assumptions that you have and engage with people. Then you analyze that and you see the patterns in people's behavior, and that allows you, that's your creative base then to come up with new solutions. So what you're doing, you're not brainstorming just off your own intelligence, but you've tapped into the collective intelligence of people that you've studied and that you've spent time with actually, and where you've understood their everyday lives and challenges. Then you build prototypes and you make them more tangible, you visualize your solution, you test it, and you launch it. So this is just something to leave behind as a process of taking an idea into a concept. And this can be a very lean, you can do this in 20 weeks easy. The other thing is a different notion when we talk about research. This is what I meant when I said it's dangerous to do desk research. A lot of people do kind of focus groups and they get people in a room. And we're saying the metaphor there is if you study animals in a zoo, you'll get very different insights than if you study them in their natural habitat. So I urge you to spend time with real people in real everyday environments, study them, observe what they do, see where they have gaps, where there could be needs that are unmet, where there are new opportunities to provide better services, better products, better solutions. And the important thing here is that don't create an artificial testing environment. Create a real live kind of space. So the next tool here is, it's the mindset that helps you to solve wicked problems. What I said before is you start off with a very naive mind. So let's imagine you want to create financial products for smallholder farmers in a rural area of South Africa, because that could be a need they have. Pretend you know nothing. And this is very powerful because you'll ask very naive questions that sound like stupid questions, but that start a very different conversation with people. Then you can switch on your more analytical hat and you can kind of unpack, what have they said to me? What does that mean? What are the insights coming out of it? Then you start getting more realistic and you're building a business case around it. And the final phase is then giving advice on what to do. We call this a 3-stage process. You start with the mystery stage. So something that you're thinking of is first quite mysterious, and we urge you to stay in that mysterious kind of phase. Then you start seeing patterns. We call that heuristics, and then there's an algorithm because it becomes more mathematical, more repeatable. The tricky piece now is that many people are seduced by the algorithmic view of the world, and they think people can be mathematically assessed, and we are, it's the whole big data hype that people can be programmed and behavior can be predicted. It's often not the case. So I think even though that first part is very messy, it's actually that where your imagination, your creativity, your intuitive thinking plays a very important role, and that guides you through the process. The final thing that I want to leave with you is a very traditional model in design thinking, and the word human-centered design was mentioned. It comes from hear, create, deliver, or then there are these 3 things. There's desirability, which is the D. It's thinking about what do people desire. The next stage is feasibility, So what can we do? What's technically possible? We call it thinking, making, and the final piece is viability. So viability is what the baby does when it can live, when it gets a slap on the bum. So has this thing got what it takes to live, and is there sustainability in it? That's your final stage normally in creating new ventures, and the sweet spot is in the middle where these things overlap. So that's about it. I think just to kind of give you that challenge that there's a really, really big job that all of us have to do to develop solutions for Africa. No one's going to do that for us. We live here, we understand this place better, and it's up to us to create new ventures for an African kind of continent. So just finally, things that we think make ventures successful. There are 5 principles that I want to leave with you. The first principle is do something that is purposeful. So understand the deeper meaning in what you do, because then people can relate to it and it gives them purpose and there's a reason for them to rally behind your idea. Create something that is useful, that fulfills a need, that solves a problem, that does something for people that they can get value from. The third principle, experimental. Something that people can experiment with, or be experimental, be playful. You're not going to get it right first. If you strive for perfection, you might never launch. And then boundaryless. Look for solutions that not only work in Cape Town, but that work outside of South Africa, that work in other emerging markets across the world. So we've got to think big and bold. So this is my final principle, and it brings me back to the beginning. Let's think value creative. So not just creativity for the sake of creativity and art for art's sake, but how does our creativity add value and enrich people's lives? Thank you very much.